Welcome to the walk-around tour of the Jaguar 900 502 series machine. Starting at the front of the machine, we'll have a look at the feed rollers. And we have our new style kidney box with our greasable seals that are covered by the auto-lube system. We have our stone detector system. Now with this kidney box, it's worth noting that every day we should be having a look at the oil level. Now to check the oil level in the kidney box, we want to make sure our feed rollers are level, and then we simply just check our sight gauge. Nice quick easy check to be done daily. Moving on, we then have our front attachment drive behind our guard. Now for machines with standard mechanical front attachment drive, the belt behind that guard will be fitted at all times. We do have the optional variable front attachment drive, and with that, if we're operating the pickup or the Orbis, the belt should not be fitted behind this guard. The only time the belt should be fitted is whenever we're operating the direct disc, due to the extra power requirements that the direct disc puts on the front attachment drive. So definitely off for grass and maize with your pickup and Orbis, on for your whole crop with your direct disc. You will see behind this guard we have our hydraulic pre-compression system on the machine, and this is variable depending on what header you have, and it can be set in an automatic and a manual mode. Moving on up, we have our connections for our front feed rollers. So up above we have our electrical connections for our metal detector and our sensors. We then have our auto lube connections for both our cutting cylinder and our feed rollers. One thing to note, if for any reason, if you are loosening these grease connections, whenever they are refitted, they need to be nipped up with a spanner to make sure they are connected properly. Otherwise you can get malfunctions with the greaser, with a warning displayed in the CBA screen. Just make sure, if you have these off, that they're nipped up. Down below is then our hydraulic fittings. These are all in quick couplers. You will notice on the new 502 series machines, they have now made all the hydraulic connections for both the feed rollers and the chopping cylinder on quick couplers. So for any reason, if you're removing anything from maintenance, you can then quickly and easily pop the quick couplers off, and then your electrical connections are the same. Moving on from our feed rollers, we then come to our front drive axle. 502 machines are still fitted with our double pump system to give us our nice low down torque and our nice climbing traction. You'll see this machine as well has also been fitted with the central tire inflation, so we can adjust our pressures on the move between road and field mode. One other thing to point out with the front wheels, if you are removing them for any reason, they are mounted on with bolts. So there is a mounting tool supplied in the toolbox that you can then screw in the place of the bolt, that gives you the ability to line the wheel up, just if you're in slightly difficult conditions. So that's our front axle. Moving on up above, we then have our ActiSiler system. So our ActiSiler system comprises of a 37 litre tank meant for our concentrated additives, and below that we then have our hand wash / fresh water tank. This tank can either be used, as I said, for hand wash with our outlet at the opposite side of the machine, or if you're finished with your Actilyzer tank, you can then initiate your flushing sequence to then clean the system out. Moving on down, we then come to our nice diesel tank, and we can also have our optional extra additional tank that can then bump our fuel capacity up to in around 1500 litres. You will also notice now on all of our bigger machines we have now fitted AdBlue as well. So all machines from the smallest 830 right up to the range topping 990 will now come fitted with AdBlue to meet the new stage 5 emissions. So moving on, we'll lift our side panel open. Nice wide axis side panel, gives us plenty of a view into the machine. If we are removing our corn cracker or we want more access, with one bolt we can remove and swing the panel open like a gull wing to give you complete access to this side of the machine. Moving in under, the first thing we will then see is our primary filter housing. So with our primary filter housing, we have our primer pump to prime everything up, and we have a water trap where we can drain our water from the system if we've got any present. From here we then go into our cooling system. So cooling system, nice big large rotary screen. We've got our new style hoover arm and pipe connection to keep the screen nice and clean. Removing our two clamps, it will then open our cooling system up nice and wide. And we can see in here we've got our 5 cooler system. Up at the top we have our intercooler, in the middle we have our oil cooler, at the bottom we have our water cooling, and then on the opposite side we have our air conditioning condenser and our fuel cooler. It is worth noting, even though the rotary screen will keep these nice and clean, it is worth getting in there every so often and giving them a blowout just to make sure you've got maximum airflow through the machine. Up above our cooling pack we then have our air filters. The air filters are relatively maintenance free. The only time we need to be looking at our air filters is whenever the warning is shown on the screen. At that point, whenever the warning is showing, we can simply remove our air filters and we just want to tap the dust off from the outside. If you do want to blow the air filters down, you should use high volume, low pressure air. That's just to make sure that we don't perforate the membranes in the filters and cause any problems. So just be careful of that. Always high volume, low pressure air to clean the system. Now, moving on into the back, we then have our auto greaser system. This auto greaser system on the Jaguar 900 models consists of a 16 kilogram hopper to keep you going through those long seasons. Now with the auto greaser system, whenever you're filling it, it should always be pumped in through the bottom. The reason behind this is that means that the grease is being filled through the pump, so it reduces the chance of an air bubble down to a minimum. It also reduces the chance of dirt ingress into the system down to the minimum. There is a cap on the top for cleaning, but we should not fill the grease through that top for the main reasons of dirt and air bubbles in the system that can then give us problems, and then the machine may not be sufficiently greased. Also in the back we have our automatic adjustment of our accelerator. That's an option on the machine. That's done by our hydraulic ram, so that gives us our adjustment between 1 and 10 in our cab for our accelerator. One other thing to point out while we're in the area of the accelerator is the grease connection for the corn cracker. Now whenever the corn cracker is connected up and we need to remove it, we take the grease pipe off, lube it round as required, and again tighten it up with the spanners to make sure it's adequately connected. If it's not connected and the seal isn't made, you'll then get a warning on the screen to say that you have a malfunction in your greaser system because the grease can't flow around the system. Also in this area, just behind the panel, we have our pump for our anti-sealer system. So we can get in there and do our maintenance access and prime up our pump from that point. Moving on back from the maintenance area into the engine bay, you'll see we have our new style fan belt drive. So we've now went on all the bigger machines with a double V belt instead of a single V, and we've also revised the tensioner. Tensioner is now fitted with a gas strut to dampen the drive, and as well as that we've now upgraded the tensioner to a more easy to adjust and easy to read tensioner. Nice simple arrow with a line. The arrow with the line wants to be at the edge of the washer for adjustment, so it's nice, simple and easy to see. Moving on back, we obviously have our auxiliary drive belt on our engine. That is all self-tensioning, just a good thing to keep an eye on the belt as you're going along, just for routine maintenance. Moving into our battery compartment, you'll see we have our 2 battery system. So slight change in the lineup. Before we used to only run 2 batteries in our 970 and 980 machines. So they were 12 volts all the time, 24 volts when starting, with the aid of a changeover relay. We have now rolled this system out within the whole range, so everything from our 800 range up to our range top and 990 will all have this battery system. So with battery system we still have our isolator, so we can isolate our system at night, but our isolation process has changed. Before we used to have a countdown timer, now we have our display LED. As soon as we open our box, if the LED is on, do not turn the isolator off. The reason behind this is it's part of the cool down procedure for the AdBlue system. So whenever the machine's switched off, The AdBlue continues to pump round, cools the nozzle. Whenever it's cooled, it'll then switch off. This can take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes normally, but in certain circumstances it can take up to 30 minutes till 3/4 of an hour. This is all dependent on AdBlue level. Obviously, the more AdBlue you have in the tank, the quicker the process will complete. So that's everything in our battery box. Up above our battery box, obviously we have our mud guards. Mud guards are nice and easy to remove as well for extra access with a couple of linch pins, and we can then take those off. Coming around to the back, this machine is then fitted with a factory fit hitch option, controllable from in the cab. If we need access to the back of the machine with a hitch, we can simply remove our linch pin from our mounting pin, and once the pin is removed, the hitch will then pull down out of the way. That will then allow us easy access to our back panel, which we can then open up with our panel spanner, and again, nice large access into the back of the machine. First thing we see in here, we obviously have our air connection for our maintenance. So we do provide an air line and a blowgun in the toolbox. We can connect it here, that can do the back of the machine, and then we have another connection point at the front that can do the front of the machine. So it gives the driver the ability, whenever he's doing his maintenance, to go the whole way around the machine. Moving on from that, we then come to our main hydraulic filter. So that's filtering our oil in our machine, and then we've got our primary filter behind that. On this filter block, you will then see we have a connection here. Now this connection is to be used for filling large quantities of oil into the machine. Reason behind that is, whenever we pump it through here, it's being filtered, so we're reducing the chance of dirt ingress down to a minimum, and as well as that, it flows to every component on the machine before finally entering the hydraulic tank. So it reduces the chance of air bubbles within the machine. As well as that connection, we also have another connection for low pressure hydraulics, and we can then use that for bleeding our corn cracker. Moving on from there, we obviously have our large capacity air tank, and in this machine that is used for our blowdown, but also used for our central tire inflation for our change around of our tire pressures. To gain access to the oil fill and the dipstick, simply release our cam lock, we can swing our tank out of the way, and we can gain access straight away to our dipstick and our oil filler cap. As well in this area, we also have our pump system. Nice big red pump for our ground drive, our black pump is for our high pressure hydraulics, and then our small silver pump is then for our low pressure hydraulics. Beside our pumps, we obviously have our header tank with our sight gauge, and we also have a low level indicator. This low level indicator will activate whenever the tank is getting to a critical level, and will warn you in time before the tank empties, and you could get a potential air bubble in your pumps that could cause damage. So that's there for our warning. Up above, we do have our breather cap. Now this is a breather cap, not a fill point, but if you are using it as a fill point, there is a gauze in there. I'd recommend only small quantities of oil, and please do not remove the gauze. It's there to stop dirt ingress. It is slow to fill the oil in, but it should be okay for small quantities. Now moving on from our engine bay, we then go into our toolbox area. So in our toolbox area, we'll have our swing out toolbox with our cantilever toolbox full of tools for working on the machine. We will also get our special tools for setting our swing and torque. We'll then get our other one for parking our shear bar and measuring our blade wear percentages. And as well as that, we'll have our blade turning tool, PTO shaft, and our transition chute setting tool. As well as that, we have our air line, and we have our drum cutting cylinder arrest tool. As well as that, we have our sharpening stone adjustment tool and our lever for opening our feed rollers. So you should have all the tools required, or the majority of them, to carry out all the maintenance procedures on the machine following the operator's manual. Moving on around the side, we can open our side panel. With our side panel open, the first thing we can get a look at is our new after treatment system. So, as I mentioned, all the larger machines will now be on AdBlue, so we've got our after treatment system in our 970, 980 and 990 machines. It is new to us, but it's not new to class. So this system has been running with our counterparts in America now for the last couple of years, and they've got on well with the system with very minimal problems. Key to the AdBlue system is cleanliness. Keep the AdBlue stored correctly, keep it in date, keep it clean, and within reason the system will look after you. So below that we obviously have our dry clutch system for our drum engagement, same system as we've had on previous machines. Relatively maintenance free and a good reliable system. As well as that, in this machine we also have our power track rear axle. The power track rear axle provides our all-wheel drive system via our hydraulic drive, which is fully adjustable within the CBUS screen. We can also have the option of central tire inflation of the rear axle if required. Now moving forward back into the maintenance area, on this side obviously we have our 375 litre additive tank. We obviously have our inbuilt pumping system. We have another red pump here, and this pump is used for our variable front attachment drive if the option has been fitted for the machine. Also in this area we have our three main valve blocks for controlling the functions on our machine. Starting on the right hand side we have our high pressure valve block. That is running at 210 bar. So just a reminder, if for any reason you are working at the hydraulic system on the machine, it runs at 210 bar. The low pressure runs at 30 bar, and then your lift lower valve blocks running at a mixture of 210 and our low pressure. It is worth noting that if you do need to carry out maintenance to the hydraulic system, it is always important to consult your dealer to make sure that you've got the correct qualified technician servicing the system. Moving on down, we have our primer button for our additive system. Whenever we fill up our tank, if we want to prime the system, simply leave the ignition on, push the button, and that will prime the system up. Now, closing the side panel and moving up the steps. At the top of the steps, we also have an air point as well for any maintenance, for blowing out your cab filters or cleaning the cab. So that's all accessible from up there. We will see at the bottom of the steps as well, this is our outlet for our hand wash. So it connects to our fresh water tank on the opposite side, so the driver can wash his hands after handling additive or doing any maintenance to the machine. Moving on forward, we then have our control panel on the side of the machine. This will control our reversing of our feed rollers, our up and down for setting the height of our feed rollers, and our front attachment functions. These front attachment functions will work in the case of an Orbis with a transport system. So if you want to adjust the transport system, you can simply select road travel mode and select the two switches at once for up and down. Nice easy access for the operator. Now moving around to the front, we've got our connections for our front attachment. Again, another air point, two hydraulic connections for your front attachment, light connections with a 12 volt supply. And then we have our connection plug for our front attachment electronics. Over here we have our yellow connection, and this is the hydraulic connection for our clutch on our direct disc. Now, one thing to remember, if you're connecting a pipe to this connection, you want to make sure, if it is a variable header drive machine, that the belt on the opposite side is connected as well. Moving back to our feed rollers finally, we have our main feed roller drive gearbox. On a standard machine, we have our hydraulic drive shaft at the top for adjusting our feed roller speed and our chop length. But as an option, if you have selected the variable header drive, you'll then get an extra shaft down at the bottom to control that. If we are doing our daily checks, another thing to point out, as well as our gearbox on the opposite side, is to check the oil in our main transfer box for our feed rollers. To do that, again, feed rollers level, and we provide a sight gauge to check that. Again, good practice to check that every day. Other things you can see in this area, we obviously have our hydraulic quick couplers up in here if we do need to remove our chopping cylinder for maintenance or for any other reasons. And that is the quick walk around of our Jaguar 900 502 series machine.